The sun was dipping low on the horizon, painting the Wild West sky in shades of fire and blood. Dust swirled around the boots of a weary rancher as he rode down a lonely trail. His hat was pulled low, shadows hiding the scars time and battles had left on his face. He wasn't searching for trouble. He wasn't even searching for hope. All he wanted was a quiet corner of the world where he could lay his head. But fate had something else waiting for him. Up ahead, a small farmhouse stood against the emptiness of the land. Its barn leaned sideways, one door hanging loose. The fences were broken, animals weak, and the yard carried the silence of sorrow. The rancher slowed his horse, curiosity tugging at him. A place this broken didn't survive out here unless someone was desperately clinging to it. And then he saw her, a woman standing at the edge of the porch, clutching her shawl against the wind. Her face was pale, her eyes restless, darting like a hunted animal. She looked no older than 30, but grief had carved lines into her skin deeper than her years. The rancher lifted his hat in respect. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and steady. "I mean no harm, just passing through." For a moment she only stared, and then, as if something inside her had broken, she whispered words that would haunt him for the rest of his days. "I'll give you everything." Her voice trembled, carrying both desperation and fear. "Just don't leave me alone with this secret." The rancher froze. He wasn't a man easily shaken. He had faced storms, outlaws, and death itself more than once. But the way her words cracked in the air like a confession, like a curse, sent a chill crawling down his spine. He stepped closer. "Cautious, ma'am," he said slowly. "I don't know what trouble you're in, but secrets in this land, they have a way of dragging a man into the grave." Her eyes filled with tears. She pressed a hand to her lips, as if keeping something locked inside. The rancher could feel it. There was a story buried here, something darker than the broken fences and the silence of the farm. Behind her, the wind slammed the barn door shut with a sharp crack. She flinched, her shoulders trembling, as though that sound alone had awakened a ghost she had tried to bury. The rancher looked at the farmhouse, then back at the woman. He could have turned away right then. He could have kept riding and never looked back. But something in her voice, something in that plea, held him captive. Out here in the Wild West, where men lived and died by their word, he knew he was about to step into a story that wasn't his. And yet, destiny had already chosen him. The rancher didn't know the secret, but he was about to. The woman's trembling words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "I'll give you everything," she had whispered, and the rancher felt them echo in his chest long after her lips had gone still. He didn't answer right away. Years on the frontier had taught him the weight of words. Sometimes silence revealed more than questions ever could. He let the moment stretch, studying her as the wind carried the creak of the broken barn door and the restless cries of the animals inside. She looked back at him with eyes wide and haunted, as though daring him to speak, yet dreading what he might say. Finally, the rancher dismounted, his boots crunching against the dry earth. He tipped his hat lower against the sun, his hand never straying far from the revolver at his side. "Mum," he said evenly, "you look like someone who's been running from the devil himself. And I've seen men chase ghosts long enough to know. It never ends well." The woman swallowed hard, her hands twisting the edge of her shawl. She didn't invite him inside. Instead, she turned her head, scanning the horizon like a hunted creature, expecting the hunter to appear at any moment. "My name is Clara," she said at last, her voice breaking like a brittle fence post. "And this place, it ain't mine. Not really. It belonged to my family, but they're gone now. All of them." The rancher studied her face, searching for the truth beneath her words. "Gone?" he asked. "Or buried?" Her lips pressed tight. Her silence was answer enough. Behind them, the barn door creaked open again. The rancher's hand fell to the butt of his revolver out of habit, but there was no threat, only the sight of a skinny child peeking out, no more than 10 years old, his cheeks hollow from hunger. Another followed, a little girl clutching a ragged doll, her eyes just as frightened as her mother's. "They're mine," Clara whispered. "The only reason I'm still standing. But they deserve better than this." The boy stared at the stranger with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, while the girl clung to her mother's skirts. The rancher gave a small nod, softening his voice. "Ma'am, if you want me to help, I'll need more than whispers. You've got fear in your eyes, and it ain't from an empty stomach. What's haunting you out here?" Clara's hands trembled, and for a moment it seemed she might speak. But then she shook her head sharply. "No," she said almost to herself. "If I tell you, if anyone knows, it'll come back. And I can't let that happen. Not again." The rancher narrowed his eyes. He'd heard men talk about curses, secrets, and blood debts before. But the way her voice cracked, the way her children's eyes darted toward the locked barn as though afraid of what might crawl out, sent a chill across his shoulders. He could walk away. He should walk away. That's what his instincts screamed. But there was something about Clara, something in the way her voice wavered between strength and desperation that pulled him deeper. He leaned on the fence rail, speaking low so only she could hear. "I've seen good men die because they thought secrets were safer locked away. But in my experience, the truth always finds its way out, and I don't care who it destroys in the process." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She turned away quickly, wiping her face with her shawl as if ashamed to show weakness. Her son stepped forward defensively, glaring at the rancher with the kind of bravery only hunger and hardship could forge. "Don't make my ma cry," the boy said, fists clenched tight. The rancher studied him for a long moment, then crouched down so their eyes met. His voice softened, carrying the weight of a man who had once been a boy just like him. "Son, I don't aim to hurt your ma. I just need to know if this land's danger comes from men, or from what's buried in the dark." The boy didn't answer. Instead, he shot a fearful glance toward the barn before darting back inside, dragging his sister with him. The rancher rose slowly, his jaw tightening. Every instinct screamed that the truth was sitting behind that locked door. Clara caught his gaze and shook her head fiercely. "No," she said again, her voice trembling. "Stay away from the barn. Promise me you won't go near it." Her words were a plea, but also a command. The rancher held her eyes, unflinching. "Ma'am, I don't make promises I can't keep. And if that barn's where your secret lies, then it's already calling my name." Clara's face drained of color. She backed up a step, clutching her shawl like it might shield her from what she feared most. And the rancher knew then. Whatever darkness haunted this place wasn't done with her, and now, whether he liked it or not, it had set its sights on him too. The evening air grew colder as the sun slipped behind the hills, leaving Clara's farm swallowed in shadows. The rancher stood near the barn, his hand resting on the worn fence post, while the woman lingered a few steps away, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her plea still echoed in his mind. Stay away from the barn, but a man like him. He had learned long ago that fear didn't grow out of nothing. Fear came from something real, something sharp enough to cut. And the way Clara's voice shook, the way her children's eyes had darted toward the locked barn door, it wasn't just grief, it was terror. The rancher turned his gaze back to her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel, "if there's danger here, I need to know. For your sake. And your children's." Clara's lips trembled as she whispered, "It's safer if you don't ask. Safer for all of us." The rancher didn't reply. Instead, he walked toward the barn, boots crunching softly against the dirt. The animals inside stirred restlessly, the soft shuffle of hooves, the uneasy whinny of a horse, a goat stamping its feet. He laid his hand on the wooden door. It was solid, reinforced with iron hinges far stronger than a simple farm should need, and across it hung a heavy padlock, rusted with age but still stubborn in its grip. He frowned. "Strange thing," he muttered, mostly to himself, "for a widow to lock up her barn like it's holding more than hay." Behind him, Clara gasped. "Please," she cried, rushing forward, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. Her fingers dug into his sleeve, her face pale as moonlight. "Don't touch it! Don't you dare!" The rancher turned, startled by the desperation in her voice. "Ma'am, no!" She cut him off, her eyes burning with tears. "You don't understand. That door, it should never be opened again. Not after what happened." Her voice faltered, trailing into silence. The rancher studied her carefully, noting the way her hands shook, the way her breath came ragged as though the mere thought of the barn was enough to suffocate her. He spoke gently. "Something happened here, didn't it? Something you've been carrying like a stone in your chest. You can keep running from it, Clara, but sooner or later the truth'll catch up." Her eyes darted away toward the dark line of trees at the edge of the property. "The truth already caught us," she whispered, barely audible. Before he could question her further, a sudden sound split the night. A loud thud from inside the barn, followed by the scrape of wood against wood. The animals cried out in panic, hooves clattering. Clara shrieked and stumbled back, clutching her shawl. The rancher drew his revolver in a single motion, his instincts taking over. He moved closer to the barn, his body tense, his finger ready. But the noise stopped as suddenly as it had come. Silence fell heavy, broken only by Clara's ragged breathing. "What in God's name?" the rancher began, but she cut him off, her voice sharp with terror. "Don't ask. Please, if you want to live, don't ask." Her words shook him more than the sound itself. He had faced wolves, bandits, and storms, but never had he seen a woman so paralyzed by fear of her own land. He holstered his revolver slowly, though every muscle in his body screamed to keep it ready. His eyes never left the barn. "What's in there, Clara?" he demanded softly. Tears streaked her face. She shook her head violently. "It's not what's in there. It's what's waiting if I ever open it. My family, they thought they could keep it buried. But it doesn't stay buried. Not forever." Her voice cracked and she covered her face with her hands, breaking into quiet sobs. The rancher clenched his jaw. He wanted to press her, force the truth out of her. But he saw the way her body trembled, the way her children peered fearfully from the cabin window, clutching each other. Pushing harder now might break her completely. So instead he stepped back, giving her space. "All right," he said finally, his tone low and steady. "I won't touch the barn. Not tonight." "But Clara, secrets don't just sit quiet. Sooner or later they come knocking." She lowered her hands, her eyes swollen with tears. "They already have," she whispered. The rancher felt a chill crawl down his spine. He turned his gaze back toward the horizon, where night had fallen thick and heavy. In the distance, far beyond the hills, a faint glow flickered, like campfires burning in the dark. He didn't mention it to Clara. Not yet. But deep down he knew, whatever secret she was hiding, it wasn't done with her, and now it wasn't done with him either. The rancher tightened his grip on his revolver. The barn stood silent behind him, its padlock glinting faintly under the moonlight, and though he had promised not to open it, the truth was already clawing its way out. The rancher spent that night in the loft of the creaking barn, his back against a hay bale, revolver laid across his lap. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the boards, every restless snort from the horse below kept his eyes wide open. And though he never said it aloud, his thoughts circled one thing only: the locked door beneath him, and the secret that rattled against its hinges like chains in the dark. By dawn, he was already saddling his horse, ready to move on. But as he glanced toward the farmhouse, he caught sight of Clara standing at the porch, her children clinging to her skirts. Her face was pale, eyes shadowed from a night of tears. And something about that sight, fragile, worn yet stubbornly holding together, made him pause. He could ride away, leave her to whatever curse haunted her. But the land had a way of tying men to fate they didn't choose. He tightened the reins, and instead of riding out, he walked his horse toward the well. Clara watched him warily. "You're still here," she said quietly. The rancher tipped his hat. Figured a widow with 2 mouths to feed could use another pair of hands. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I told you last night. I don't want you tangled up in my troubles." He tied his horse and gave her a long, steady look. "Ma'am, trouble has a way of finding me whether I look for it or not. Might as well face it head on." She didn't answer, but she didn't send him away either. And so, the rancher spent the morning fixing fences, chopping wood, and showing Clara's boy how to swing an axe without cutting his own foot. For a brief while, laughter rang out, a sound the land hadn't heard in years. But peace on the frontier was always borrowed time. By midday, the rancher rode into town for supplies. It wasn't long before whispers began trailing him. Men at the saloon leaned on their chairs, spitting tobacco and muttering, "You hear that stranger's hold up at the Crawford place?" One said, his voice carrying just enough. Another smirked. "Fool doesn't know what he's walking into. Folks round here know better than to touch that land." The barkeep shook his head, lowering his voice. "Whole family gone in less than a year. First the husband, then the brothers. Some say it was fever. Others say darker things." His eyes darted toward the rancher. "Best steer clear, mister. Ain't nothing there but bad luck and bones." The rancher didn't rise to their bait. He gathered his supplies and left without a word. but the weight of their gossip followed him back across the prairie like vultures circling overhead. When he returned, Clara was waiting, her eyes sharp with fear. "What did they say?" she demanded before he even dismounted. He set the sack of flour and salt on the porch. "Nothing worth repeating." Her face twisted, half in anger, half in despair. "They think I'm cursed, don't they? They think anyone who sets foot on this land will die just like the rest." The rancher held her gaze. "I don't believe in curses, but I do believe in secrets. And secrets get men killed faster than bullets." Her hands trembled as she pulled her shawl tighter. "You don't understand. If the truth comes out, my children will pay the price." Before he could answer, the boy stormed onto the porch, his fists clenched. "We don't need him, Ma. He'll just end up dead like Pa and the others." The girl clung to her mother's skirts, sobbing quietly. Clara pulled her close, her own eyes brimming with tears. The rancher stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "Son, I ain't here to take your father's place. I'm here because your Ma asked for help, whether she'll admit it or not. You can hate me all you want, but I won't walk away while danger's breathing down this farm." The boy glared at him, then spat in the dirt before storming back inside. Clara's face crumpled, guilt etched deep in every line. He's just a child. He's lost more than he can carry. The rancher tipped his hat low. "So have I." The day stretched long and heavy. The rancher worked, the children kept their distance, and Clara drifted between silence and quiet sorrow. But as night fell, the peace shattered once more. From the woods beyond the farm, faint voices echoed, harsh male carrying across the wind. The rancher's hand went to his revolver as he stepped into the yard. Clara appeared beside him, her face drained of blood. "They're here," she whispered, clutching his arm. "Who?" he demanded. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the horizon. "The ones I've been hiding from. The ones who'll never stop until the truth is theirs." The rancher's jaw tightened. The barn loomed behind them, its padlock gleaming in the moonlight. The secret inside had drawn these men here, of that he was certain. He turned to Clara, his voice hard as iron. "You've got to tell me what's in that barn. Clara, if we're to stand against what's coming, I need the truth." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling freely down her cheeks. She shook her head once more, her voice breaking. "No. If I tell you, you'll never look at me or my children the same again." The rancher's hand tightened around his revolver. In the distance, the glow of torches flickered among the trees. The threat was no longer whispers. It was coming fast and sure, and the secret of the Crawford farm was about to bleed into the open. The torches drew closer, their glow flickering against the dark tree line. Men's voices carried through the wind, rough, angry, and eager. The rancher's hand tightened on his revolver, but his eyes never left Clara. "Clara," he said, voice low and steady, "if you want me to stand with you, I need to know what we're facing." Her breath came fast, panic rising in her chest. She clutched the shawl tighter around her shoulders, as though it could shield her from the truth pressing to escape. Her children huddled behind her, wide-eyed, trembling. At last, with a sob, Clara whispered, "It's not a curse. It was never a curse. It's blood, my family's blood. And it's locked inside that barn." The rancher's eyes narrowed. "Show me." Her hands shook as she led him across the yard. Each step toward the barn seemed heavier than the last, as if the earth itself resisted giving up its secret. She fumbled with the padlock, her fingers clumsy with fear, until at last the metal snapped open. The rancher pushed the door wide. Inside, the shadows parted, revealing the truth. Chained to the beams, hidden from the world, was a man, wild-eyed, gaunt, his clothes torn to rags. His wrists bore raw wounds from iron shackles, his chest rising in shallow, desperate breaths. The rancher's jaw clenched. "Who the hell is this?" Clara's tears spilled freely now. "My husband." The rancher turned sharply, his hand hovering near his gun. "Your husband? Folks said he was dead." "He should be," she whispered, covering her mouth. "He came back from the war not as the man I married, but something else." His mind, it snapped. He grew violent. "He killed my brothers when they tried to stop him. He tried to hurt the children." Her voice broke. "I had no choice but to lock him away. If the town knew, they'd hang him and brand us all cursed." The chained man snarled, thrashing against his bonds. His eyes burned with madness, a beast trapped in a man's skin. The rancher's stomach twisted. For weeks, rumors of curses had swirled. But now he saw the truth, no spirits, no ghosts. Just one broken man, hidden in the dark, and a family crushed under the weight of his secret. Behind them the children whimpered. The boy clutched his sister's hand, torn between fear and fury. "You lied to us, Ma," he whispered. "All this time, Pa was right here." Clara fell to her knees, her sobs racking her body. "I wanted to protect you. I wanted to keep his memory alive, not the monster he became." The rancher closed the barn door partway, his voice sharp. "The men outside, are they here for him?" Clara nodded, trembling. "They know. Somehow they know. If they find him alive, they'll drag him through the streets. They'll destroy us." For a moment silence pressed heavy on them all. The rancher's eyes moved from Clara to the broken man in chains, to the terrified children clutching each other in the corner. He understood now. This wasn't just her secret. It was her shame, her punishment, and her prison. Outside, footsteps crunched closer. A voice shouted, "Crawford! Open up! We know he's in there!" The rancher drew his revolver, the steel gleaming in the lantern light. His voice was firm, resolute. "Then tonight we make a stand. But Clara, this ends one way or another. No more secrets." Clara wiped her tears, her body shaking as she forced herself to her feet. She looked at her children, then at her chained husband. The decision carved itself into her heart, harder than iron. She whispered, "Then help me end it." The rancher gave a single nod, his jaw set like stone. As the first fists pounded against the farmhouse door, the barn stood heavy with the weight of revelation. The past was no longer hidden, the secret was no longer safe, and the night was about to bleed with the reckoning of truth. The pounding on the farmhouse door grew louder, each strike rattling the walls. Voices barked from outside, harsh and demanding. "Clara Crawford, bring him out! We know your monster's still breathing." The children clung to their mother, their little bodies trembling. Clara's face was pale, but her eyes shone with a desperate fire. The rancher stood at her side, revolver drawn, his jaw locked tight. "They'll tear him apart," Clara whispered, voice breaking. "And when they're done, they'll come for me. For the children." The rancher scanned the barn, his mind racing. The chained husband snarled from his corner, thrashing against his bonds like an animal sensing blood. Every rattle of the chain echoed louder than the men outside. "Listen to me," the rancher said, his voice sharp but steady. "This isn't just about him anymore. It's about whether you keep letting fear run your life or you face what's coming." Clara's breath shook. "If I let them see the truth, we'll be ruined." The rancher stepped closer, eyes burning into hers. "And if you keep hiding, your children will never be free. Secrets rot a family from the inside, Clara. Tonight it's time to choose." Before she could answer, the door crashed open. A group of men stormed in, rifles raised, torches flaring. The leader, a scarred man with a crooked grin, stepped forward. "There he is," he sneered, eyes fixed on the chained figure. "I told you all she was protecting a killer. The Crawford land ain't cursed, it's rotten with sin." The rancher raised his revolver, stepping between the mob and the family. "That's far enough." Laughter rippled through the men. "And who are you? Some drifter thinking he can play hero? Step aside, stranger, before you end up lying next to him." The rancher's voice cut sharp through the tension. "You want justice? Fine, but justice ain't the same as slaughter. This man's broken, not cursed. Don't make yourselves executioners." But the men had already tasted blood in their minds. One raised his rifle. Another spat on the floor. "He killed good man. You protecting him makes you no better." The standoff snapped like a brittle twig. The first shot rang out. The rancher shoved Clara and the children to the side, firing back with a steady hand. The barn erupted in chaos, gunfire flashing, torches crashing to the ground, shadows leaping against the walls. The chained husband howled like a beast, pulling against the iron with unnatural strength. The children screamed, clutching their mother as she dragged them toward the far corner. The rancher moved with calm fury, each shot deliberate, driving the mob back step by step. But they were many and he was only one. Clara, trembling, grabbed a fallen rifle from the floor. For a heartbeat she hesitated, her hands shaking, her heart pounding. Then she raised it high, her voice ringing out, "Enough!" The men froze, stunned by the sight of the widow they'd all whispered about. Her hands no longer hid her shame. They held steel. Her eyes blazed with a fury none had seen before. "This is my land," Clara cried. "My family. You call it cursed, but the only curse here is your hatred, "You'll not take another drop of blood from us." For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The firelight flickered across their faces, some twisted in anger, others wavering with doubt. Then the scarred leader snarled and raised his torch. "Burn it! Burn the whole place down!" Before he could throw it, a deafening crack split the air. The rancher's revolver smoked in his hand. The torch clattered to the dirt, snuffed out before the flames could spread. Silence fell, heavy and absolute. The men shifted uneasily, their courage slipping away under the rancher's unyielding stare. One by one they backed toward the door, their muttering fading into the night. The scarred man spat once at the ground but did not stay to fight. Soon the yard outside was empty, save for the echo of retreating footsteps. Inside, the barn reeked of smoke, sweat, and fear. The rancher lowered his gun, his chest heaving. Clara dropped the rifle, tears streaking her face. The children clung to her skirts, sobbing in relief. The only sound left was the ragged breathing of the chained man, the broken husband, the source of it all. His eyes burned with madness still, but his body sagged against the chains. Clara stared at him, torn between grief and loathing. "I loved him once," she whispered, "but he died long ago." The rancher placed a steady hand on her shoulder. His voice was low, gentle but firm. "Then it's time to let go, for you, for your children." Clara closed her eyes, nodding through her tears. The reckoning had come and passed, and though blood had been spilled, something deeper had shifted. The fear that had bound her was broken. The barn stood quiet now, but its walls had witnessed the storm, and outside, beneath the endless western sky, a new dawn was waiting. The barn smelled of smoke and sorrow. The chains still rattled softly as Clara's husband slumped against the beam, his wild eyes dimming in the lantern light. The rancher stood guard, revolver loose in his hand, listening for the return of footsteps. But none came. The mob had gone, leaving only silence and the wreckage of fear. Clara knelt on the hay, her children clinging to her skirts. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly look at the man she once loved. His face was gaunt, his beard unkempt, his body broken down by madness and iron. Yet behind those eyes, she searched for the husband who had laughed with her on the porch, who had cradled their newborns with gentle hands. He wasn't there. Not anymore. Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out, stopping just short of his shackled hand. "I tried to keep you alive," she whispered. "I tried to remember the man you were. But he's gone. And I cannot chain the past any longer." The husband groaned, his lips forming half-words, curses lost to a mind that no longer knew reason. Clara pulled her hand back, her body trembling with grief and release all at once. The rancher stepped closer, his voice low. "Sometimes letting go is the only way forward." Clara closed her eyes, then gave a single shuddering nod. The rancher loosened his grip on the revolver and holstered it. "We'll bury the truth, Clara, not with chains, but with a grave. He deserves rest, even if he lost his way." At dawn, beneath a sky painted gold and crimson, they laid the broken man to rest in the earth behind the farm. Clara stood tall, her children at her side, as the rancher lowered the final spade of dirt. No prayers were spoken, no words carved in stone. Only silence, heavy but cleansing. The boy, his face pale but resolute, finally broke the quiet. "Is it really over, Ma?" Clara placed her hand on his shoulder. "It's over, son. The curse was never on this land. It was on our hearts." The rancher rested the shovel and looked at the small family. The weight of the night still pressed on him, but so did something else, respect. Clara had found her strength, and her children had seen the truth that would shape them for years to come. As they walked back to the farmhouse, Clara slowed her steps until she walked beside him. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly. "But you did, and because of that my children still have a future." The rancher tipped his hat. "I reckon everyone deserves someone who will stand with them when the storm comes. Tonight just happened to be your turn." Her eyes glistened as she studied him. "And what about you? You could ride on, leave us to mend our lives. But would you consider staying, at least until the children can find their feet?" For a long moment the rancher said nothing. His gaze stretched across the wide prairie, the horizon endless and free. The drifter in him ached to ride on, to keep moving as he always had. Yet, when he looked back at Clara and her children, fragile but unbroken, scarred but still standing, something stirred in him he hadn't felt in years, belonging. He exhaled slow, the weight of decision falling away. I'll stay as long as I'm needed. Maybe longer. Clara's lips curved into the faintest, weary smile, the first true smile he'd seen from her since the day they met. The children, though wary, looked at him differently now. Not as a stranger, not as a threat, but as a man who had stood between them and the fire, who had faced their darkest truth without turning away. That night, as the wind swept across the plains and the farm creaked back into uneasy peace, the rancher sat once more on the porch. This time the chair didn't feel borrowed. It felt like a place earned. The widow had faced her secret. The children had faced their fear. And the drifter had found a place where his wandering soul might finally rest. The West was a land of scars and shadows, but it was also a land of second chances. And on that lonely farm, under a sky endless with stars, a new beginning had quietly taken root.